We have the privilege this morning of having David Taylor, who's Vice President of Empower One, here with us this morning. We're going to ask him some questions. He uses some office space here, and so we're glad to have him in the building, and we're glad to have him with us this morning to be able to talk to him a little bit about what Empower One does. And so, this is David Taylor.
Yeah, it's really special. Thank you, Chet. Thank you, Mill City Church, for letting me have an office up at the top. I'm the white door without the sign. I need to get around to that. Sometimes I prioritize some other things. But work just above my now very good friend Ben that I've been to Sudan with, which is kind of cool, right? That God put all this together. It's really extremely special for me to get to worship with you today. I'll get a little choked up. But when I come into a place where I know that the name of Jesus is being proclaimed and the gospel's going out from, it blesses me beyond what I can express. And so, great job for what you're doing and for your existence in Casey, South Carolina as a gospel light. I believe God has big plans for this church. And just from the inner workings that I see, like, this is awesome. And it is so special for me to get to worship with you today. I am David. I'm the Vice President of Empower One. I've only been doing this for almost a year. In 2 days, it'll be my first year with Empower One. Prior to that, I did a little over 20 years with the Southern Baptist Convention as a Southern Baptist pastor. Most recently, that's at Shannon Baptist Church, and I had been the missions pastor at Shannon before I jumped in with Empower One. I think the next question is, what's Empower One? Is that right?
That's a good place to start.
Yeah, so Empower One actually started out as Empower Sudan. So, right now it's Sudan and South Sudan, but there was a time a little over a decade ago when it was just one big country still that was at war with itself. And when they started out as Empower Sudan, they would try to wire money to our national leaders over there. And when the U.S. government saw in the banking system that we were trying to empower Sudan, that screamed terrorist. And so the money was getting blocked. They had to rename, went to Empower One. And I think maybe that gets us more to the heart of what God was doing. At this time, Sudan was both geographically impossible to get around in. It was also had the same struggle as a lot of the north part of Africa in the 1040 window where Islam is supreme. And so those were the two big obstacles. It was very, very hard in what was then the 10th largest country in the world to get the gospel out. In addition, there were some issues. And there was this guy named David Kaya, national leader from South Sudan, who wanted to see the church get healthy. There were lots of people in Africa at the time, around the world, doing rapid disciple-making movements, lots of churches being planted, some of them dying really quickly. And this issue came up, and this is kind of the start of Empower One. There was a team from the U.S. who went, they followed the Great Commission call, they went to Africa. They were going to help launch 2 churches in a couple weeks with a church planter that was being trained through Empower One. And it turns out they did. These teams went and they planted one church in one city and one in the next. Same church planter. One with one wife and one with the other wife. And out of Islam, like, that was the norm, right? And so David Kaya said, no. If we're going to do this, if we're going to see a gospel movement happen, it's not going to be so a gospel movement can happen. We're going to teach them the scriptures. We're going to teach each man that's going to plant a healthy church to be a healthy man. We're going to watch life and doctrine closely. They slowed down the planting of churches and focused on the health of the churches, the health of the man planting the churches. And Empower One was actually started to empower David Kaya. So when we look at the word Empower One, we look at empowering David Kaya. At this point, it's become to all of us empowering each and every African leader to lead the Great Commission movement in their own country.
Okay. How's that going?
It's going great, and it's hard, just like it is everywhere else in the world, and specifically in ministry, in churches. We're coming out of COVID, and in so many ways, that's awesome. In so many ways, there's just things we have to clean up. There's things we've learned. One of the stakes in the ground that Empower One has placed is that we will build some actual buildings for the first time. We've never been about that. Our African leadership likes to call them flagship churches. Think like flagship phone. That's how they think about it, like the model for the others, you know. But here on our side, the U.S. team, we like to call it like our sending church or our anchor church, or maybe our church multiplication centers, where we focus on what it means to raise up godly men and women to take the gospel out. We send them out, and we continue to nurture them after they're sent so that they can remain on the field. Along with those flagship churches, we are doing some other things, like we're putting in Christian primary schools because it's the only option outside of Islam for some of these children to learn. We have clean water at all of our churches, that kind of thing. And God's really blessing it, but we're in the middle of that effort. So on the how's it going, we need to check in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, and see how it went.
How many countries are y'all in?
We're in 5 countries. I think that kind of actually leads into the next question, which is how to pray, right?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Yep. So when we're looking at how to pray for us, we've got 3 P's that I'd ask you to remember, all right? Persecution, power, and people. And when I say persecution, I mean this. Our pastors and their church members, the men, the women, and the children are often persecuted. And it's not always just in Muslim environments. Persecution also happens in tribal environments when you're not from the right tribe. And so we'd ask that you'd pray, and we would ask that you'd pray for safety and health and all those things that you'd naturally think about. But our men and women and children would ask that you'd pray that they would be faithful. And that's a harder thing to do, but it is how the gospel often goes forth in these environments. Second of all, we'd ask that you pray for power. We think that we're doing a good thing and doing a good job with Empower One, but you know what doesn't change the hearts of man and bring people from death to life and bring light to darkness? The work of man, even Christian men. We need the power of God. We need God to do his transforming work in the lives of people. And we request your prayer because prayer is our chief strategy of reaching the 1040 window. And then finally, people, Luke 10:2 says, the harvest is plentiful, but the
laborers.
Yep, and those are people. And you can't empower people that aren't on the team. So we ask that you would pray that God would call out. Pray for the kids that are going to be going to these primary schools, the young boys that will one day be church planters. Pray for the engineering students and the agriculture students that we know in the University of Khartoum right now who are in hiding as Christians but are going to be going out as launch teams with our church planters, and they're going to be tithing members that are not dependent on the Western church and trying to do really good stuff in their world. So pray for God to call out laborers to the mission field to share the gospel, more baptisms, more churches being planted.
If somebody wants to find out more information, you'll stay after and talk with them?
Yes, I'll be out in the lobby, and I would love to talk to you. We love to partner with people and with churches. We don't have like a one-size-fits-all thing with that. We are very relational. And so I'll give you an example of kind of the types of things that end up happening. Right now, we have in one part of the north part of South Sudan, one of our church planters or church planting teams is in a really difficult situation in that there's a witch doctor, and his name, is this being recorded or publicly shown? Is it being publicly shown?
It's not live or anything, so we can edit this down.
I'll just withhold the name just in case. So there's a certain person. The first part of his name's Ayong. We won't give anything away if that's all I say. And he's a witch doctor, and these planters have gotten back with us that, you know, it's hard for us to relate to, but these men are saying, like, there is a darkness in the community that this witch doctor holds. And so as an organization on the American side, we fast and pray every Thursday for Ayong so-and-so. And there are people who have kind of in relationships said, hey, I'll go to war with that. I'll pray with you on Thursday. And so that's in relationship. And we think that's a super meaningful way for each person that's in this room to participate in what God's doing in the 1040 window. So that's just an example, but I'd love to talk to you about anything like that.
Yeah, thank you so much for being with us this morning. If you have one final thought, you may share it.
Yeah, and way to tee it up. That sermon was awesome, got me jazzed up.
Thank you. You didn't have to say that.
Yeah. Well, I thought that's what you said was the only way I got to be on stage today, is if I complimented you in front of your church. So anyway, by the way I ended up here was Chet. It was kind of funny. We were over at, do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
We were over at Peacewise, and I pegged him as a preacher, believe it or not. And I said, I bet you're a pastor. And anyway, somehow that turned into me working up here. So one thought is this, and it's a pretty big ask, and it's super concrete. And I know not everybody's going to be able to do this ask, but I'm going to ask you to seriously consider this ask. If you've never been on a mission trip to the 1040 window, I'd ask that you try to make that happen in the next 3 years of your life. The financial sacrifice that's required, the humility it takes to ask people for money, the rearranging of schedule, all of those things, it's a hard ask. But I believe that God has called each person in this room to full obedience to the Great Commission and their unique role in it. And I think when you frame full obedience to the Great Commission, like let me just go. I'm just going to put a plug for Ben real quick. Can you just do this with me? 10, do this. 10, 40, Africa, left arm, Asia, 1040 window. All right? That part of the world is the part that Chet's talking about. All right? If you get a vision from God for what he's doing there where no one else is paying attention, your view of God is going to blow up. And your view of self is going to get really small. And that humility and that gratefulness and that God-sized vision for your life that is generated out of that experience is going to change everything about the way you lead your family, the way you lead in this church, the way you go across the street and knock on the door that the gospel will be known among all peoples. And so please give serious consideration to just going.
Thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Thank you.